Madame Michel Leduc, qui est notre hôte ici. C'est grâce à elle, on va l'applaudir, parce que c'est grâce à elle qu'on a pu avoir la femme ici.
Bon, très bien. So I am a physicist. I work here. My lab is downstairs. This is the Laboratoire Kastler-Brussels, which was founded by Professor Kastler a long time ago. Both of them are no longer here. And this is the lab where Claude Cohen-Tanucci, the Nobel laureate, is working, and I am actually in his group. So I've been for long in charge of this IFRAF, which is a network of Ile-de-France, the Paris area for cold atom science. And now there is a new network in Ile-de-France called CIRTEC, système dans l'Île-de-France pour les technologies quantiques, for quantum technology, which includes cold atom physics, but also a lot of other domains. Okay, so I will present briefly what we call cold atom physics, how it works, and I said I will say a few words about the new field of relatively new field of quantum technology. Okay, so this is just a thermometer to show you the scale of temperature. You can see that at the top you have the temperature of the sun. Here at 3 Kelvin you have the cosmic background radiation. The temperature of the Earth, you know that where it is, it's around 30 degrees Celsius, or 10 to the 2 Kelvin, and this is in temperature Kelvin. You have the liquid helium, the cosmic background radiation at some point. Is there a pointer? Ça marche?
Ça, c'est là, laser. Non.
Le pointeur?
Oui, le pointeur.
Ah, ça y est.
Okay.
Voilà.
And this is only to go.
Oh, oui, le pointeur c'est là. Voilà. Alors, vous avez la temperature of liquid helium, 4 Kelvin, and then you can go much lower. You can go together with the method I will describe. We can go to clouds of ultra cold atoms here in the millikelvin range, and with a more elaborated method, we can even go lower in temperature to nano Kelvin or 10 to the minus 1 milliardième of Kelvin above the absolute zero, which is extremely cold. So you see the scale of temperature is amazingly large, and the field of ultra cold atom is very relatively recent. This was the method to cool so very low was discovered no more than a decade ago. So I will say a few things about the principle of the laser cooling, and then mention the Bose-Einstein condensation, which is a very fascinating new phenomenon, and then I will turn to the applications of these cold atom methods for quantum technology. One will be the quantum simulation with cold atom. The other ones will be the instruments that we can manufacture with cold atoms with extreme precision, and if I have time, say something about quantum communication. Okay, the principles can be understood but with the basic ideas of atomic physics. The very simple atom here is represented by two levels, the ground state level E1, an excited state level E2, and when a photon is occurring at the right frequency, with the right frequency nu, it means the right energy to be absorbed. It also carries an angular momentum P, which is h bar k. K is the momentum, h is the Planck constant. So this is the basic of atomic physics. The atom absorbs, if the energy is okay, of the photon, absorbs the photon, and then re-emits it through spontaneous emission in all directions. Here are the photons, which can be in any direction. And the idea of the cooling is that when the atom receives, absorbs the photon, it receives a kick which pushes it in the direction where the photon is coming, and after re-emission, which can be completely random, altogether the kick is what remains, and this pushes the atom in a certain direction, which is the direction of the laser beam coming with this particular momentum and energy. So this is the basic idea how to push atoms in a direction. Of course, there are some more to be understood, but this is the main idea. It's when you receive a ball, somebody is shooting you with a balloon. You receive it and you make one step in the opposite direction. At the same time, you can also cool, because slowing a beam of atom is not exactly the same as decreasing the temperature, because the temperature is defined by the spread of the velocities in a gas. And if you combine this force for this kick that the atom receives with the Doppler, with the Doppler effect, you know what the Doppler effect is, you can also decrease the temperature. The idea is, this is a 1D picture, you have the gas of atoms, and the gas is between two counter-propagating beams in the two opposite directions, slightly detuned from the atomic frequency. And if you play with the Doppler, you can compensate for the lack of energy here by the Doppler effect, because the beam is traveling in a certain direction. The atoms are supposed to be at rest. So if you do this by combining the Doppler effect and this kick received by the photon, altogether you create a friction force which decreases the velocities of the atom progressively, and then you get to low temperature. So this force can also, this Doppler friction force, can also be used for making a trap. So the atoms can be, if you put the atoms between three beams, three pairs of beams counter-propagating, you can trap them. You can make them like in sort of a molasses, like in a honey pot. That's why it's called molasses, and the atoms can be trapped between the beams. You have a picture here. Of course, everything is in the ultra high vacuum. Voilà. The first molasses was observed by Stephen Chu at Bell Labs quite some time ago. And you can trap the atoms in this molasses, and the temperature is typically microkelvin. And you see that the velocity is already much reduced, because millimeters per second compared to the normal velocity of the atoms in this room, it's typically kilometer per second. So it's already very much reduced velocity and temperature. Alors, in order to work with these samples, we have to trap them a little bit better. So new traps have been developed. They are called magnetic optical traps, and now it is the usual tool which everybody uses in the atomic physics lab. I don't want to describe very much of the process, but it combines beams, as I said, like for the molasses, but polarized, optically polarized, and combined gradients of magnetic fields. That's why it's called magnetical optical trap. It's and you can trap a billion of atoms at typically 1 millikelvin. So this is a picture, for instance, of such a trap. You can see the atoms. This is all for ultra high vacuum, and here you see a little spot, which is the fluorescence of this little sample of cold atoms of strontium. This was awarded by the Nobel Prize to Koen Tanuji here, and Bill Phillips and Stephen Chu. You know the names of these people. This was quite some time ago, and what Kontanuji did is to explain the process, because the big surprise at the beginning of this domain is that the temperature that was found was much lower than had been calculated. So new mechanism had to be discovered, and this is what Kontanuji did with his expertise on atomic physics from his PhD thesis, and okay. So Stephen Chu did the first magneto-optical trap. So this was the early days. There are other traps which do not use magnetic gradients, but only light, and you can also trap atoms in so-called dipolar optical trap with laser beam focused and detuned from resonance with the Doppler friction process that I briefly described. So these are the new tools. This is what an experiment looks like, more or less. You see there is a lot of optics on the table, but it's not so much. There are, mirrors, laser diode, and so on, a lot of lasers, but it's a bit complex, but it's not a field where you need hundreds of people, like in CERN for high energy particle physics. It's still at the human size. 3 or 4 people, PhD postdocs can operate it. Alors, the very interesting phenomenon that was observed was the Bose-Einstein condensation when reaching this temperature very low. You know that to a particle you can assign a wave. This is the particle wave equivalence. And the wave, called the de Broglie wavelength, with a particle of mass m, is given by this formula. And if the temperature goes down, the wavelength increases. At room temperature, in a box, you have particles with velocity. This is the velocity This is the velocity. At the velocity of 1 kilometer per second, the particles are far apart, and the waves which go with each particle do not overlap. But if the temperature goes down, then the wavelength increases because the velocity decreases, and at a certain threshold, all the waves, they can overlap. And this is, when they overlap, there is a threshold for so-called condensation. It means that all the atoms become in a different state of matter called condensate, Bose-Einstein condensate, in which all the particles are more or less as if they were only one particle. It's like in the laser. There is a coherence between the behavior of all the particles, and this is what's called a condensate. It's a condensate, but not like in solid-state physics. It's a condensate of gas, which is a dilute gas. Voilà. Alors, so in order to do that, the magneto-optical traps did not give enough low temperature, and other phenomena had to be invented. It's called evaporative cooling. It's very much, the atoms are in a trap, and it's very much like what happens when you have a cup of tea and you want to have it to cool it, and you just blow the atoms on the top, you evaporate them, and the rest of it becomes more and more cold. So I don't want to go into details, but we deal with collisions inside of two particles, 2 by 2, inside the trap, and some kind of thermalization. So there is an energy redistribution by elastic collision in the trap, and altogether it cools to very low temperature. Voilà. Sorry. And then this is what was observed, the condensation of the Bose-Einstein condensation in 95, and you have temperature decreases from here to here, and at a certain threshold you see a very sharp peak of atoms below the threshold, below the condensation, which means that all the atoms are condensed. So this was first observed by this Cornell, Weinman, and Ketterle, and they received the Nobel Prize for this in 2001. And now this is a tool which is very, very much used. I want to just to show you the first interesting experiment which was done by these people when they managed to make a condensate. They had two condensates and they let them drop and expand. And when the two condensates overlap, because they become bigger and bigger when they drop progressively, at the part when they overlap, they saw fringes, and fringes means interference. Interference means wave, and this was a clear description that they had a macroscopic wave for the atomic matter. So it was very spectacular and confirmed the hypothesis of the de Broglie wavelengths. Voilà. Alors, now I want to say a few words about what can be done, which might be of interest to you. First of all, quantum simulations. As you know, there are many problems in solid-state physics which are not solvable easily because the matter is complex, there are defects, there are many particles in a piece of solid, and you don't master exactly all the phenomenon. The quantum simulation with cold atoms is something that we can try to do with an ensemble of atoms where we can master all the parameters, the distance between the particles, the geometry of the lattice, and also the interactions. We can vary. This is something I don't want to describe, but we can vary the interaction so that it can be a sort of a toy model for many problems which are difficult to describe. Alors, a way of doing this is to put this is a condensate, and you put it in a lattice. You can make a lattice of waves, comment dire, counter-propagating beams make une onde, standing waves, and with potential, with nodes and antinodes, and in this potential you can trap the atoms, so that you can trap them between with two pairs of beams. So you can put them in slices. Or if you use more beams, you can make so-called optical lattice of 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 3 dimension. In 3 dimension, you have all these cold atoms that you can distribute like in an egg box. And this is a way to simulate a crystal. And you see that according to how deep is the well that you create with this counter-propagating, making the lattice, you can have it very low or very high. If it is very high, all the atoms are distributed one by one in each box, and it's the equivalent of a Mott insulator in solid-state physics. Otherwise, if the wave, if it is not very deep, you have the atoms. They can randomly circulate in the crystal, the so-called crystal, and it's equivalent to a superfluid because the Bose-Einstein condensate is a superfluid matter. Voilà. And now what we can do is make images like with nanoscience. In nanoscience, you know, we have tools, opticals, in order to see all the atoms on a surface, and you can also move them one by one. The same can be done with the cold atoms in an optical lattice. Here, the lattice, and you can visualize them with appropriate optics. You see all all these atoms, one by one, you can see them and move them. So this is something very, very useful for simulation. Now, just one more about quantum statistics. You know, I've been so far talking about bosons, but you know that the matter is made of bosons and fermions. It's mainly fermions, actually, that make the material of this table. And fermions can also be cooled. The bosons are cooled, as I said. Same principle can be applied to fermions, and you can, these fermions, you can manipulate them one by one. As I said, either you put them in an optical lattice, or you can also use optical tweezers that you've heard of in biophysics, for instance, and you can manipulate in a trap these some atoms. You can observe them there, and you can, with appropriate optical device, make them one by one construct a network and a pseudo crystal. Voilà. Alors, quantum simulations can help solving particles, many particle physics, which are very hard to understand. So we make artificial crystals, as I said, and with the fermions, we simulate more or less the matter. And the questions which are actually addressed is to understand the ITC superconductivity. As you know, if we would understood better this phenomenon, we would be able to transport electricity without loss from a desert to our cities. This is a dream, but so far no material has been found which is able to do that. But in case the processes of superconductivity would be better understood, for instance, with our simulation with cold atoms, maybe we could find new materials. And there are many other phenomena interesting to the physicists that could also be understood better. Voilà. So this is the first part of my talk. How much time is left? If there is...
You have 8 minutes.
8 minutes. Okay, so something I would like to mention is that one pillar of this quantum technology is very precise instruments for metrology. And you know that clocks are extremely important, because with the clock, clocks are used for transferring time from one country to another. Clocks are used for functioning of the GPS, and so on and so forth. So the clock, the best clocks so now are made with cold atoms. This is the usual atomic clock that everybody has in a room. You know that it operates with cesium-133 on a transition, which is a hyperfine splitting of the cesium, which is 9.9 gigahertz in frequency. What was discovered some years ago is that the clock that you've seen, the cesium clock, could be very much improved using cold atoms. The idea is that if you can measure this frequency for a longer time, the longer is the time of measurement, the better is the precision. And the idea is that if you use cold atoms, you can observe this frequency during a longer time than with normal clock. So this is the fountain clock, which increases the precision by a factor of 100. You have a little cloud here in a magneto-optical trap for cesium, and you give a kick to this cloud, it goes up and goes down, falls down, and this is why we call it a fountain. And you interrogate with radio frequency in order to measure the frequency with great accuracy, with a time which is increased compared to normal clocks, because you are having atoms which travel very slowly up and down. The interrogation time is second instead of millisecond, and the precision is very much increased. So this is the idea. The first atomic fountain was made in Paris. It's a big thing, which is But there are, of course, such clocks everywhere in the world, in Germany, not in Peru, I think, not yet. But and the last thing I want to mention about the clocks is that we are about to send one such clock on French design on the space station in order to have a clock rotating around the Earth, which will give the time to all the clocks all over the world. This is how it will be. So it's a kind of achievement to have such a complex system operating in space. There will be several links, and it will be a time reference and validation for all the clocks in space. And I just finished mentioning that atomic clocks, there are atomic clocks everywhere on the globe, and, but there are different types. Not only there are some are optical, some use ions, and so on. And so far I describe only the cesium, which is the reference for the time. Now the second is defined with cesium, but this will change next year. There will be a complete change of the units. The unit system will be revised next year for the whole world, and you will hear about it because it has some consequences for les normes for metrology. Anyway, so this is what will happen. This is a space clock, the clock in space here, and all the clocks on Earth. Voilà, I've just keep that because it will help to verify the prediction of general relativity, having a clock up there. Something I want to mention, because it's a lot of fun, is that if you a very precise measurement was made in GLab with a clock on the table, and when they pushed the table up by 30 centimeters, they could show that the clock was giving a different time. This is some time change when the clock was pushed up, and this is a consequence of general relativity, which said that frequency depends on the distance to the center of the Earth, and 10 centimeters compared to the radius of Earth. So that gives you an idea of how precise these clocks are. So we are very proud of the accuracy of the atomic clock. It's ranging 10 to the minus 18 here with the best clocks in absolute accuracy. It means 1 second compared to the age of the universe, milliards of years. So this is absolutely fascinating. And this is what cold atoms could do here. Okay. Bon, voilà. Alors, I think 3 minutes. Another type of apparatus that can be made with cold atoms are interferometers using matter waves, the same as interferometers with optics that you know. You split a beam into and then recombine, and you have interferences at the end. You can do that with cold atoms or the waves associated with the cold atoms. And if you would had exactly the same area between the two arms, you would win a factor of 10 to the 11. Of course, it's difficult to make such big things, but there are a lot of potential for improvement with cold atoms for interferometers that are used for gravimeters or for sensors to gyroscopes. Okay, there is already one matter wave gravimeter which is made by a small company called Muquens in Bordeaux, which is not bigger than this, and which gives gravimeter gives measurement of the acceleration of the Earth. It can be used for detection of gas, of petrol, and also to check seismological problem on the Earth. Voilà. Donc I think I better stop at that point. But the quantum technology, it's now a new field. It's relatively new, not completely new, but it is now very much developed. There is a European flagship where €1 billion over 10 years is supposed to be given to us. Let's hope. And it's just starting. That's why in Ile-de-France we started this CIRTEC network, and it has 4 pillars on the basic science. I have mentioned sensing, metrology, this is what I described. Simulation I also mentioned, but there is also communication and computation, and computation means the quantum ordinateur, comment on dit ordinateur? Quantum computer, which is the dream but not yet arrived. And communication is the cryptology made with entangled photons using the basic principle of quantum mechanics, which is also already developed but could be improved in order to be extended to longer distances, so it needs repeaters and others. So it implies a lot of technology. So this is what I can finally say. I don't know, there is no more. Conclusion, after 30 years, the field of quantum is still very active on both basic science, the fundamental science, and application. New quantum technology make a large use of quantums and other individual particles. The beauty of it is that now we can handle microscopic particles one by one. And this is the start of the second quantum revolution.